Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We're here to share the information from our latest survey. And I am going to share my screen and hand it over to Jake.
Thank you so much. And it's great to see everyone this afternoon. And so today, as already mentioned, we're going to run through the RP group demographic survey results and we have some Q&As here at the tail end as we finish up. So next slide, please. So we're going to go over the survey overview. One of the biggest pieces of that is our strategic goals. So you can see that we want to actively engage in our California community college systems in the recruitment, retention, and achievement of a diverse and inclusive field of research and planning professionals that intentionally reflect our students. And so today, we've been collecting this. This is the third time you'll see some trend data, which is really helpful as well. And so just from myself as a board member, and saying that we use this to prioritize and build in and ensure that we meet this strategic goal. And you can see the different points here that really guide our work. So next slide, please. And so as researchers, I know what we really want to do is start off with the response rates and seeing how we cover it. So you can see from 21, 23, 25 is on the bottom of these graphs. We have it broken down by internal, the board and staff, and also consultants, and then the greater IRPE professionals. You can see that response has been stable. One piece of this, though, obviously, is that we want to ensure that we always work towards increasing our response rate, specifically around the professionals. So that's one thing I think from a question perspective, and later on we can discuss the strategies to ensure people are completing it. But overall, it's still stable, which is a good thing, which is helpful in running over our trends. So next slide, please. So what you're going to see in this presentation today, demographic data for our community. We also will have some comparisons across, which is always important. And we'll go with the board and community, and then also internal members versus the community, and then the greater California Community College system. And then we'll go ahead and hit the next slide. We'll have questions and next steps. All right, so first and foremost, if you could go ahead and join this Padlet, and it is in the chat as well at this point. What we have a few questions for you to think as we're going through this is what stands out to you in the data. What implications do these findings have for diversifying the IRPE community? And how can we continue to increase the response rates to the survey? So kind of did a little bit of a spoiler there in the very beginning, I suppose. But this piece for everyone, please join that. Did everyone get that? I just want to get a check here and make sure everyone was able to join as we're going through. Perfect. All right, I think we're ready for the next one. Please just go ahead and put in the chat if you run across anything. We'll not, I should say the world we, it's not me. The fabulous staff is going to help you on that piece. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the IRPE committee. And next slide, please. All right, so what's in this section? We see our, we already did the all response. We have the experience overall, and in the system, we have position, educational attainment, and also field of study. And then we have the disaggregation. So what you're going to see throughout these different pieces is position, gender, age, LGBTQ plus identity, and ancestry. So that's going to be really key. You're going to see kind of that breakdown and also the trends over the three different times. So next slide. All right, so here's the respondents. So first and foremost, who took this survey is key. And so what you see here on the bottom is you have it by position. And so you analysts is that the very first one that goes up to decline, not to state. So we have deans and directors of category, and also executive vice presidents, and then other. And so what you can see with the response over the last 3 times of taking this, which is you can see that a little bit of an increase here from the deans and directors and coordinators responding to the survey compared to 2023. So next slide. Now, we also have here just now by gender. So you're going to see this breakdown each time. And then we have three here again, the 3 years. We have men, women, and non-binary. And so the overall piece of responding to this one is that those who identify as men has increased steadily since 2021. You can see the total respondents there too, to kind of, I think it's helpful to see how many, especially when we're breaking it down to percentages. So you can see the 121 to 205, and then the most recent year at 179. All right, so next slide. And then one thing here is we have a newer one, so we don't have this available for this, but these were added in 23, but we obviously want to know age as well and break that down. So age is on the bottom, starting with under 25 and then upwards to 65 plus. What you'll see here is the majority of respondents were less, I wouldn't say less than 45, but 45 years or younger. And next slide. Right. So when it comes to disaggregation for LGBTQ plus of the respondents, we had a increase. You can see from 21, 23, 25, we can see it go from 11%, 13% to 80% for those that identify with LGBTQ plus. And so next slide. And so this is important. Just the overall piece here is how things were categorized. So you can see how each group for ancestry was broken down and categorized. And so we'll go ahead and jump into that next slide, and we'll see the respondents by this disaggregation. All right. So one thing that you have here again on the bottom, we have it by ancestry on the graph, and then we have it over the 3 different times that this survey was given. And so the overall piece of those respondents that took the survey this time, we had proportions of Asians increased, and also the for Hispanic, Latina, O, and X professionals has decreased slightly, given the past ones. So then with this, I'm going to pass this over to Dr. Cooper. And I know, oh, I had one more. I, okay. All right. I was looking at the count. So with this last one here, one thing that is good is that we went ahead and added just a little bit more here and dive a little bit deeper into it, and which is really helpful just for multi. And so what you see here again is the largest proportion of IRPE professionals is white, followed by Asian and Hispanic. All right, so I do now believe that is I'm passing this over. So next slide, please.
Well, can I jump in here and
Yeah.
say this is something new when we've presented this. We've done for those of you who are familiar with our position paper about people who identify with more than one. We forced them into one category, and we had that hierarchy. But this is another way of presenting that, and just a shameless plug for our upcoming peer-to-peer. We're actually going to be talking about this. So if you're here today, you're getting a little bit of a preview of at least one way of showing those folks who identified, who maybe only marked that one box, right? So that's kind of that first column, the darker shade. But it also shows you how many people all identified with that and others, right? So the lighter shading are the folks who clicked that box and at least one other box. So hopefully we can have you'll come, and I know I didn't prep Alicia for this, but if she wants to find the links for peer-to-peer and or the position paper and put those in the chat. I'm just sorry, I just thought of it. I would have prepped you for it. So as you're able to put those in the chat, that would be great. But this is a new way that we're looking at presenting race and ethnicity to honor people who identify with more than one race or ethnicity. Okay. Now, next slide for me. I don't have to say that because I'm controlling the slides. I'm so used to it though. All right. So I'm going to talk about the experience that folks have. And I'll just say here, for the sake of time, I'm actually only presenting. We asked the question for those of you who remember the survey. We asked how long have you been in IRPE, period, regardless of system or location. And then we asked how long have you been in IRPE in the California Community College system. Again, for sake of time, I'm only going to present the former and just people's overall IRPE experience. So what you see here is that across the 3 years, most of the respondents to the survey have been in the field for less than 10 years. When we look at it by position, not surprisingly, people in the dean, director, coordinator, and executive positions are more likely to have 10 or more years in IRPE. When we look at it by gender, women and non-binary respondents have less experience compared to the men, but that gap is significantly narrowing between the women and men in the field. When we look at age, again, not surprising, these things are correlated in terms of most of our respondents that are younger than 35 are newer to the profession with 5 years or fewer. When we look at LGBTQ respondents, over a third of them have fewer than 5 years compared to only, a little less than a quarter for those who do not identify as LGBTQ. And when we look at it with ancestry, people who are multi-ancestry or African American were tended to have fewer than 5 years of experience compared to other races and ethnicities. So next, when we look at the people's positionality, right, what positions they have in IRPE, and we look at that by gender, what we see is our men or male respondents who are analysts or senior analysts or executives has increased markedly since the first time we did the survey in 2021. When we look at age, our analysts tend to be younger than 45, and the majority of our executives are 45 or older. Again, not terribly surprising there. With LGBTQ, the representation has increased among analysts and executives. And when we look at it by ancestry, a couple of things here. Asian, those who identify as multi-ancestry or indicated other, were more likely to be analysts and less likely to be in leadership roles. And the proportion of our Hispanic, Latino, I know how to speak Spanish, Latino, Latinx, and Native American professionals who are at that dean, director, coordinator level has increased. All right, this is where I hand it over to Dr. Gilmore.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. Good afternoon, everyone. Go ahead and strap in. It's going to be me for a minute, giving you all this good information. So first slide, please. And before I go deep into it, the educational attainment, and this is new, and I am the blame for it. I thought it was very important for the organization to understand, one, who is part of this community. Also, I think it's very important for you all, as you may advocate for your positions at your institutions, to be able to explain to your college what should actually be the minimum quals. I know for most of us, for the most of the institutions, it's probably a BA. However, it seems that many people have a master's or above, even coming in as analysts, and definitely when they go into either senior or leadership role. And so it's important for them to kind of understand what the field is comprised of, because then it may allow you the opportunity to kind of change what the quals are which means you can kind of change what the pay is. So forward thinking. So when it comes to educational attainment, the majority of the IRPE community members entered the field with at least a master's, and they continue to advance their education by attaining doctorates during their careers as IRPE professionals. So as entry level, many of us are coming in with the master's, but definitely progressing while we've been in that role. Next slide. The majority of deans, directors, and coordinators and executives have a doctorate, and a vast majority of the analysts have at least a master's, as we said before. And so we are a highly educated group, and it's good to have this documented as we kind of professionalize, our role at our respective colleges. Next slide. Pulling a Jake, I got mixed up because of my role in this one. Educational attainment by IRPE experience. A majority of the field without a graduate degree and fewer than 10 years experience. That is what we're comprised of. So we're getting younger. We're getting younger. And so it's going to be nice to see what this looks like over the next few iterations. This is done every 2 years. And so we are going to see an interesting trend line, I think, over the next few iterations of this survey. Next slide. Educational attainment by gender. It's broadly similar across men and women, so nearly equal proportions holding a doctorate degree. So that's good to see. Next slide. A majority of IRPE professionals are between 25 and 45, and they hold master's degrees, while those between 45 and 65 are predominantly holding doctorates. So that jibes with pretty much all of the information that we've been talking about. There is kind of a bifurcation between those who have less experience and more, but it does go back to earlier slides about people are progressing within the field when they enter versus when they get older. So they're not staying analysts unless they want to, and they're getting education. So next slide. The rates of doctorate attainment are slightly lower among LGBTQ and IRPE professionals relative to those who do not identify as LGBTQ. And it'd be interesting if people are entering questions or things they notice in the Padlet. If you're having questions in your mind, hopefully you're putting them there so that we can have a more robust discussion later on. Next slide. When it comes to ancestry, IRPE professionals from minoritized communities, African American, Black, Asian, Hispanic, Native American, are more likely than white professionals to hold a doctorate. Stick a pin in that one. That's an interesting finding. Next slide. When it comes to field of study, once again, sorry, I'm responsible. I take the blame because not only do I want to know what our educational backgrounds are, but what field of study, because you have interesting conversations, especially at some of the regional meetings that you'll have people come from STEM backgrounds. You got social science, you got some people throw a curveball and you're like, wow, I didn't even see that as a pathway. And that just shows you the different just the different roads and paths we take to become IRPE professionals. Next slide. So here are the notes on how we categorize the different pathways and educational backgrounds that comprise our field. That looks so sexy. Next slide. So most of the field hold social science bachelor's and master's degrees, while only and the doctorates are mainly in education. So a lot of EDDs. So if people are going to have doctorates, it's usually gravitating towards EDDs. Next slide. Across the field, social science degrees are the most common, but deans and directors and executives tend to hold doctoral degrees in education. Next slide. When it comes to field of study by experience, it doesn't appear to cluster by years of IRP experience. So there was no really significant leaning or finding with this slide. So it's probably a good thing. Next slide. When we look at gender, women in the field are less likely than men to hold degrees in STEM and much more likely to hold social science degrees at all three levels, which I see as a pattern beyond RP and our field. So it's kind of par for the course. And that's a whole nother discussion, whether, the implications of that. Next slide. A larger portion of the younger IRPE professionals, which is 25 to 35, have STEM degrees compared to those in the field who are 35 or over 35. Mid-career professionals, 35 to 54, are more likely to hold doctorates in education, while those 55 or more hold master's degrees in social science. So that kind of adds an interesting pattern that's starting to unfold. And like I said before, in the next iterations of these surveys, we'll see if this holds true of the younger IRP professionals who are coming into the field have STEM backgrounds, or a high proportion of them have STEM backgrounds. And I think that is important to note, and why I wanted to have this type of data, because that helps inform the type of professional development that the organization can provide for the field so that we are the best IRPE professionals we can be, irrespective of background. When we, next slide. When we look at the field of study by LGBTQ, social science degrees are more prevalent among the LGBTQ IRPE professionals compared to their peers who do not identify as LGBTQ. That is a lot of alphabet going on here. When it comes to ancestry, Asian professionals in the field are more likely than other groups to hold humanities degrees, while African Americans or Black IRP professionals are often holding graduate degrees across multiple disciplines. It's interesting. I don't know if you guys are interested. I find it interesting. Next slide. Comparison of the RP group versus the board versus the IRPE community. So next slide. So the IRPE community and the RP board is our comparison. And the proportion of women on the board has increased steadily since 2021. And this representation is now higher than what it was in the IRPE community, which is great to see. Next slide. With representation regarding LGBTQ in 2025, trends show that representation diverged with decreases in the RP group board and increases within the field. So there's only so much you can take from it as far as the RP board because the numbers are so small. So you are always going to see more flux in the representation with small numbers, of course. So it's good to see the field is becoming more diverse, though. Next slide. In 2025, the RP group board became more diverse with increased Hispanic, Native American representation. However, Asian American representation remains below the IRPE community levels. So there's some work that needs to be done there. Next slide, please. When it comes to the bigwigs, the deans, directors, and coordinators and executives are overrepresented on the RP group board relative to the overall IRPE community. However, the proportion of analysts on the board has increased over time, and the gap has closed considerably. I am one of the non-dean director coordinator. I am of the analyst group. Viva la analysts. So we are still becoming a voice within the RP group board. Thank you. Next slide. When you're looking at educational attainment, the RP group board has a higher proportion of doctoral degree holders than our IRPE community. And the RP group board members hold at least a master's degree. Next slide. Oh, my run is over. Back to you, Jay.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it so much. Right back over this way. So I get to do a warm handoff here in just a second too for the closing, but in this transition, we're going to go ahead and do a comparison of the RP group internal members to the community and also to the greater California Community College system. So next slide. All right, so just a couple notes here about how this was done. So using at the time this went to the board, fall 25 data was not quite available in Datamart. So spring 25 was used in this analysis. Also, when it comes down to the data on gender, age, race, ethnicity, for direct comparisons, some of those pieces you can see here is not published in Datamart. So that has some limitations for us. With that said, though, we still did some because it's important to kind of lead our work and really focus and prioritize as an organization and board. So next slide. All right, so on these next couple ones, you're going to see the same breakdowns across everyone. And what you're going to see is that we'll have administrator, classified professionals, full-time faculty, part-time faculty next on there. we'll have the student population, then the community, and then internally for the organization in the same way. Each year you see here, like it was already shown for the last 3 times that the survey has been given. And then the case of you see here with the gender distribution that the IRPE community is on par with other CC employee groups. Internally, RP group has a slightly higher proportion of women. All right, so next slide. All right, so this next one is by age, and what you can see here is that same breakdown with each graph. The findings of this analysis shows that the IRP, the proportion of younger IRPE professionals under 35 is on par with California Community College's classified professionals, and higher than administrators and faculty. And compared to all groups, the IRPE community has a small proportion of staff over 55, and kind of going back to some of the other findings we saw a little bit earlier in the deck as well. All right, so next slide. I got a boo for that. So there I appreciate it. That's what happens. I'm coming in here and getting boos, so appreciate that. All right, so the next one here is ancestry, which is really next piece here, so you can see that IRPE community and the administrators more diverse than faculty. But again, from a work perspective, going back to Dr. Gilmore's point here, it's less diverse than our student population. All right, so next slide. And this is where I do a nice warm handoff to Dr. Cooper for the closing, so I appreciate it.
Well, thank you to Marcell and Jake for taking us through all that data. So just to wrap up, especially for those of you who joined us maybe a little bit late, here are some of the key takeaways. And so our African American, Black, or multi-ancestry professionals tend to be earlier in their career compared to professionals from other groups, which could be the need to make sure that we're doing some targeted retention and professional development efforts there. Another finding specifically to our Black professionals is that they're early in their career, but that's also they're more likely to have higher levels of educational attainment, with 2/3 of all the respondents holding a doctoral degree. So we've got interesting pairing there. So while our representation across ancestry, gender, LGBTQ plus has increased since we started doing this survey in 2021, we still have more work to do to make sure that we are strengthening our efforts to be inclusive of these and other historically marginalized communities in the IRPE space. Our Asian and our multi-ancestry professionals are less represented in leadership roles, which underscores another opportunity to strengthen the work that we're doing on advancement and leadership. Our LGBTQ plus representation on the board is a bit behind what we're seeing in the broader community. Again, another opportunity related to board recruitment. And then while we have the deans and directors, which it's not surprising that they're most of the board, or they tend to be overrepresented in comparison. Very happy to see how much we've been able to close the gap with so many more analysts, and that has been intentional of recruiting and inviting, encouraging, pushing analysts to please come join us on the board. Again, most of our folks have their undergraduate and graduate degrees in social science, but most of the doctorates are in education. I will say we did not ask if it's whether it was an EDD or a PhD, and it is possible to get PhDs in education. So shout out to my people with PhDs in education, but we just asked whether you have a doctorate of any kind. We didn't separate out EDD from PhD, just for clarification. And then again, our deans, directors, our executives are the ones who are more likely to have those advanced degrees, whether that's master's or doctorates in education. And the note about women were less likely than men to have any degrees in STEM and much more likely to have degrees in social science. So we can pause here and see if there are questions. The next slide was just for those of you, I think Alicia's been doing a great job of putting the link to the Padlet in. And so I'm happy to kind of take this presentation down and pull up the Padlet and see what we have. You can do that, or you can put questions in the chat as well. But we do want to thank you for coming. And before I take this down, there is a link here to the web page where this webinar and the slides will be posted as soon as we have them ready. And I think Alicia is putting that link in the chat as well. So they're not there yet, but you can come back, and we will obviously be sending this out through our communications once we do post it to the website. But in case you wanted to hold on to that, that is where you'll find that information. So I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'm going to try to pull up the Padlet. All right, we'll share my screen again. All right, can everyone see that? Good. All right, so let's just take them one at a time. Consider changing age to younger than 40, 40 plus than 35 when comparing the employee data. Thank you for that suggestion. We need more women and non-binary individuals on the board, as well as African American. Here, here. Agreed. Glad to see that people are being hired with associate degrees. Yes, agreed. Promising to see the growing diversity in the field for entry level. Do we really need an associate degree or above? Is the bar too high? That is a question that has come up in terms of our minimum quals. If you noticed, most analysts have master's degrees or higher. But if you look at most analyst job descriptions, they require a bachelor's degree. So that's a topic for conversation.
All right, can I piggyback on that?
You may.
It also depends on the institution's job listings, right? Like how they categorize or think about the research position at a respective college. Do they have those entry level positions? And I would think that a majority offer analyst positions as maybe the entry level versus some places have research technicians, some have different categorizations that may allow for people with different educational backgrounds to at least enter the field and then hopefully progress as their education and experience increases.
That's a good point about, I think historically the lowest, if you want to think of it that way, the lowest level or the position that the entry level position has been an analyst. Yes.
I entered my position as a research assistant as ABD. So I understood it was a foot in the door, but we did have research assistant as a position.
I love the response to this about research around those current minimum quals. That's actually something that we are looking into. As part of we have a little work group. We call it the Career Advancement Work Group, but we're part of what they're doing is looking at the pathways and trying to identify potential barriers in our system. Okay. Um, Increasing proportion of professionals who identify as men, decreasing proportion who identify as Latino, Latina, Latine, and the increasing proportion who identify as LGBTQ. Okay. So feel free to keep putting things as they come to you. Implications, what do we got? How were those in the field of public health categorized? Well, this is actually a really good opportunity for me to shout out the person who created all those lovely graphs and slides and really put up with a lot of changes, including up until this very morning, to our presentation, which is Lauren Alano, who's on our staff. She's been just obviously high level of skill involved in pulling all this together, but also a high level of patience. So I told her I would give her a shout out, uh, making sure that she recognizes that. But if she's able to either come off mute or put in the chat and answer to the question about public health and whether how they were coded and if they ended up in the social science group. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, thank you all. Yeah, so for public health, we did not have an explicit kind of field or response option in the survey, but we did look through all of the open-endeds, and for those that identified public health, we coded them as social science.
Thank you for that clarification. You came just in time. I love the note here about attracting more public health candidates, and that's is something that we've talked about in terms of we've had conversation when we really kind of started going down this road. We were taught I remember being in a session and I just asked the question honestly off the top of my head. I said, how many of you knew, well, I mean, I was joking a little bit because I said, how many of you knew you wanted to be an IRPE professional when you were in elementary school? That was when people said, what do you want to be when you grow up? How, how many of you did that? In most audiences where I asked that question, no one raised their hand. Then I asked, okay, I'll let that go. How many of you, knew that you wanted to be an IRP professional when you were an undergraduate? Very many hands. Then I shifted my question to say, how many of you even knew about this profession when you were an undergraduate? And there was some of this, like, maybe a little, right? Most folks learn about this profession, at least historically, especially those of us who've been around a long time. We learned about it either in graduate school or after entering some other career and shifting to a career in IRPE. So there's definitely more work to be done to increase people's awareness of this as a career path. And one of the pushes that we've been doing is, and we still have a lot more to do, is to encourage researchers to get in front of students on your own campuses because you've got a diverse group of students right there outside your door. So whether that's classroom visits, it's going to career fairs, whatever those opportunities are, but going to the career center, let those students know that this is a career, right? You can go to stats classes, you can go to social science classes or psych classes, social classes, all those classes. And again, it's not that we're trying to make them all IRPE professionals, but uh, I think awareness is definitely the first step. Dr. Gilmore.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that public health is brought up as a pathway to the IRPE field. I have discussions sometimes about my work with my wife, who's in the health field. And one of the things that came up was about the ACE survey about adverse childhood experiences and a conversation about trauma. That definitely comes up in medicine, but we don't really discuss it as much in education. And the same people who go see their doctors are are our students as well. And I think someone who has that public health experience or background would probably start having conversations about trauma in education. And I think that's an important topic that we need to address. We always say mental health, but we don't talk about always the trauma that people come to our campuses with. And so I'm looking forward to the increasing diversity of people entering the field, not just in the way they look, but the backgrounds, the educational backgrounds they come from.
Right. Okay, preliminary findings from our internship project. The short answer is no, but we are absolutely committed to sharing that information as soon as it becomes available. It will probably be sometime next year in 26, 27. So stay tuned for that. But the project is going, and we hope to be able to share information about that at that time. But thank you for the question. Okay. I don't know if there were any other additions here. Just checking. Uh, increasing our response rate. Building community and administering it at our different events. That is a great idea. I was thinking about this of how we could do this, because the issue is right now is that the survey is anonymous. So that's why we do it every other year. That's why folks, have to, go ahead and fill it out every other year, is because we don't know who you are. So we won't know who filled out the survey. And I don't know how people would feel about, I mean, that one option for doing it that way to make sure we don't get duplicates, um, is to not make it anonymous or give some kind of code or something to make sure that it would tell people you've already filled this out. Because I know I did have people kind of saying, did I fill it out? I don't remember, I'm not sure. And I'm like, I can't tell you because it's anonymous. But we can definitely explore what options might be there. The next suggestion: shift the survey administration timeline so it coincides with the RP group to attend people to complete it during the conference. All right. I like that. I like that. The last one here is increase the marketing campaign, include the recent results and emerging new questions. Encourage managers to ask their employees to fill it out. Yeah, this theme has actually been coming up too in different conversations about how we can support managers, supervisors in supporting their staff and getting their staff more engaged in professional development, making sure their staff are aware of different resources that are out there, and then just, supporting especially for like if we want more analysts on the board, your supervisor has to be supportive of that because the board takes time. And so you've got to have someone who is understanding and supportive in your efforts, because the board is, I know we don't necessarily advertise it this way, but maybe we should. It is professional development. I mean, I'm going to ask my two board members who are my co-presenters if they, would agree with that statement that being on the board is professional. I mean, it's obviously professional contribution. It's service to the field, but I would like to think, I know I was on the board eons ago, and I definitely looked at it as professional development. But maybe this is an opportunity since our elections are coming up, the nominations are going to be opening up. Why don't we've got a couple minutes, why don't we give a plug in this space for people to run for the board and say how you can tell them how awesome it is. Okay, nobody's coming off mute. Come on.
No,
I'll do it. My ascension, it started off as an at-large board member. Then I was elected, and then I progressed from that to VP professional development, and now I'm president-elect. And if you would have asked me 5 years ago or so, would I be involved with the RP Group board? My answer would have been a resounding no. I don't like them. They're cliquish. And as I became more involved I was able to enter that space as my authentic self, and issues and concerns that I had, I was able to address in that space. And so I went from having no voice to being involved with this survey and having questions put on there that I thought was interesting for the field to answer. So um, I reach out to you all to say if you're even considering um, joining the board, you should move forward with that that itch to be involved with the field. Um, Coming up in a couple months will be an opportunity for you. If you have questions, we will have an opportunity, a space for you to ask questions about running for the board. You don't have to be a dean or director in order to be a member of the board. So keep that in mind.
I will just say that I've definitely been on for a second myself. And I will say that just as much as I've given to the organization in my time, I've gotten back in professional development has made me a way better professional in this field. And so that's my shout out to it. Just a kind of a plus one, and that's my add to it.
Thank you. I know I often do that. You see, I'm just like, oh, I just think of it and like throw it to folks and pull them in. Are there, before we conclude, are there any questions, any comments? Anyone wants to come off mute or, oh, yes. Hi, Jamie.
Hey friends, thank you for this. This has been super informative and I really appreciate all the work that went into it. Mine's just a comment, not only on the quality of the work, but also just noticing how many of these patterns have also been documented in more national literature on labor. For example, that kind of pipeline cutoff for Asian colleagues trying to get into management has been really well documented. So it's interesting to see that happening in our field and thinking about things that we can do to address that. And then just to comment, if it's helpful, I know that we don't have the statewide data in our system on LGBTQ students. However, nationally, proportionally, we're looking at between 20 and 23% as of last year or 2024. So you can see that like as our field starts to eat closer to being representative of our student population, you know, we have at least that national benchmark we can look at and know that you know, it's also interesting to see, even though the ends are small, how the board kind of fluctuates with that as well. But just thought I would comment if that's helpful context.
Well, Jamie, I think we should do thank you for those comments. We should also do a shameless plug for our session at the IRPE conference, where we will be talking about CARE and IRPE and how we partner, and we are not competitors. And that preview, I like to give people who show up to these things just like little gifts here, which is we are talking about taking this demographic survey statewide to include our UC, CSU, and private university partners. So we'll have even more comparison data. So we're in the works now of doing that for the next iteration of the survey, which would be, at least right now, is planned for fall 27. But I did see that comment about maybe lining it up with our surveys, or if we line it up with the CARE survey. All right, so we got more to think about. I'm sorry, the CARE conference. We've got more to think about. But look for us if you're going to be at the IRPE conference. We'd love to have you join our session. I forget what time of day it is, but you can
Me
look.
too, but yeah. Yeah,
All
and
right.
also a quick note on that. Sorry, I wanted to share if it's helpful. When we did our site selection survey and we included that on-site recruitment for that survey at CARE, it was really helpful. So if we need to revise timelines or do two kind of open enclosures for the CARE and RP communities, I thought that was a really good idea. It worked really well for us last year.
Great. Thank you so much.